I can't take it anymore. You've talked ill about Goosebumps for the last time. I'm gonna have to deal with you. Yeah. Ah! Now it's time to deal with you, Chicky. No more, Chicky. Ah, my hair! Hey, you did a pretty good job on my hair. But that doesn't excuse anything. I'm still coming after you. You're not getting away that easy. Quick, roll the intro while I go after it.
Beware, you're in for a scare.
Hey guys, Lytane here. It's good to finally change my clothes and have a shower after, being kidnapped by Chicky for so long. Oh gosh. Well, obviously he's not here in my bedroom, so I'm not sure where he could be. Let's go and have a look, eh? He's not in the study. No, he's not in the aviary. He's not in my bowling alley, nor in my conservatory space room. He isn't here either. Look, I reckon if I start talking about Goosebumps, Chicky is bound to pop up out of nowhere, because, that's just how he does things. So one thing that I haven't really talked about much, or really at all, is the fact that this is a TV show made for children. So I'm an adult looking back at this show, and it is very, very different from my viewpoint when I was a kid, because now I'm not the target demographic. So when I was a kid, a lot of these episodes actually did scare me. The use of the shadows and the puppetry and all the different monsters and everything, and the evil that lurks around all the corners, it really did scare me as a kid. The fact that all of the main characters are 12-year-olds as well, that also got to me, because I was a kid too, so I could easily imagine myself in these situations, and then I would get more scared because of that. Like, what if I discovered monster blood, or what if I was being attacked by jack-o'-lantern people? I honestly don't know what I would do. But coming into the show as an adult, I can see just how unscary most of the episodes are, and just pretty much how lame a lot of them are as well. But see, even the complaints of some of the nonsensical episodes didn't really bother me as a kid. It was a story, it was entertaining, and it scared me a little, and that's what it was meant to do. The thing is, though, that I barely remember any of the episodes before I went back and watched this. Sure, I remembered the Haunted Mask episode and one of the Slappy episodes and even the Cuckoo Clock of Doom episodes, but the majority of them were just faded from my memory. This show didn't have any lasting impact, even though it did scare me as a kid, and I think that's pretty bad. Other shows that I used to watch around this time, I still have very fond memories of, and I can recite a lot of the episodes, like Rugrats or Ren and Stimpy or even Dragon Ball Z. I can name and talk about most of the arcs, and if you just tell me about some of them, I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember the time Goku did that. So this show doesn't have that kind of appeal to me, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's other people as well. One episode that I did remember was Cuckoo Clock of Doom. In this episode, John White plays Michael. You may know him as Eric Stifler from the bad sequels to the American Pie series. In this episode, we have a normal family that has a demon child named Tara. Well, that's not really true. She's just a super bitch that treats Michael like nothing, like dirt, and she ruins everything, even his 12th birthday party. Everything goes wrong for him, and he is really upset with his family until his dad brings home an old grandfather clock. Michael turns the head of the cuckoo backwards and goes to sleep. He wakes up only to find that it is his 12th birthday again. That's strange. Then he sleeps and he wakes up and finds out he is 6. Uh-oh, the clock is sending him back in time. He figures it must be the clock, but he has to get to it. When he sleeps and wakes up again, he is just a baby. If he sleeps again, he's sure that he will cease to exist. Though as a baby, he does manage to get to the antique store and turn the head of the cuckoo clock right way, but before that, he accidentally knocks off the 88 on the clock. He wakes up to find that he is 12 again and everything is all back to normal. That is until you hear about the twist. Because the year 88 was knocked off of the clock, Tara, who was born in that year, just wasn't born. So I guess everybody in the entire universe born in 1988 just wasn't born. It was just 1 year without babies. Now, he could could go back and try and fix things, but he decides it can wait. So this episode made me yell at the screen so much due to Tara and her evil, evil ways. There is no way that a child could be that evil and suffer absolutely no consequences. I would have exploded and tried to get rid of her long before Michael did. Even Michael's friends are total assholes and treat him like shit. It made me laugh though because it was just so over the top and it was just absolutely crazy. The other thing that really annoyed me was the fact that when Michael relives his 12th birthday party, he still does the same things and he still gets humiliated in the same way. You'd think he would have learnt his lesson. Even if he didn't realize he traveled back in time, he still had an inkling. Like, what a dumbass. Honestly, after watching all 4 seasons, I don't think another episode is quite so over the top in terms of acting, so I was very happy when Tara ceased to exist. Maybe I'm just evil too. He's not in this room either, and I really need to get Chicky out here. I know. What if I talk about one of the best episodes in the entire Goosebumps run? I mean, out of 4 seasons, I think one episode really outshines all of the others, and I'm sure that a lot of people will agree with me on the best episode in all of the series, so let's check it out. The Haunted Mask is of course the episode that I'm talking about, and it's funny because it is also the first episode in the entire show run. This has Catherine Long starring as Carly Beth, a girl that jumps at everything, and I mean everything. She's a total scaredy cat. She is terrorized by 2 other kids and vows to scare them for Halloween. She doesn't want to wear her duck costume due to it being too cute, so she goes to this creepy mask shop where she discovers the Haunted Mask. It's grotesque and horrifying, and she absolutely loves it. She wants it, and against the protest of the salesman, throws money at him and just takes it anyway. Her mum makes this creepy head figure of her in her pottery class or something, and that is the last part to Carly's costume. She puts on the mask and uses the other head on a stick to show who she used to be. Things take a turn, however, when the mask won't come off, and it starts making her into a real jerk. She ends up scaring the other kids, but she takes it too far, going really feral in the process. It's really entertaining to watch her descend into her just evil madness. But when she wants to be good again, the mask doesn't come off. The mask salesman says that she needs a symbol of love in order to get it off, and she uses her old clay head, saying that that's the true her. It's a good tale which uses a mixture of be careful what you wish for and don't be mean to people and be true to yourself and other things like that to get the point across, but none of it is done in a preachy way like a lot of children's stories. The acting is also pretty good with Carly Beth and the mask. Oh my god, it's just amazing. The twist here is that her brother puts on the mask at the end and scares everyone, which isn't the best twist in all of the series, but it's not a bad one either. This scared me as a kid, but it also fascinated me. I wanted to find a mask just like this and wanted to try it out and be super scared that it would get stuck to my face. The tease of the other masks in the shop as well also made me extremely curious because I wanted to know what those masks did and what they would do to a person when they put it on. I had this personal theory that each mask was a different sin, you know, the 7 deadly sins or something, but yeah, I'm just a stupid kid. I also love ducks, so when Carly Beth ruins a duck costume, oh, that made me upset, but I was a kid.
The Haunted Masks is one of the best episodes indeed. I'm so glad that you actually liked it.
I do, Chicky. It really is a great episode. Why don't you come on over here and we'll talk and be friends?
Why don't you talk about some more good episodes first?
Yeah, okay, well, they did make a sequel to this in the book, and they did turn it into an episode as well, so let's talk about that one. And the sequel to the episode called The Haunted Mask is called The Haunted Mask 2. Nice and original. This story is set a year after the first one at the next Halloween. Steve, one of the kids that got scared in the first episode, says that this may be his last year as a kid to do trick-or-treating, so he wants to scare people as his final outing. This episode of the 2-parter is very similar to the first story. Kid wants to scare others, finds the mask, puts it on, loses his friend due to bad behavior, terrorizes the town, and doesn't listen to anyone. It's actually pretty boring. The saving grace here is that the first mask is awake and latches onto the salesman in order to cause mischief, but you don't know what he actually wants. Honestly, the first episode is pretty boring. The second, though, is so much better. The plot advances so you know the old mask wants to destroy Carly Beth's plaster head so that she becomes vulnerable to the mask once again so it can latch onto her face and live with her forever. It's kind of creepy. It uses the other kid to do this. Speaking of the other kid, his mask is pretty cool and grotesque, and it turns him into an old man, so by the end of the episode he walks with a cane and has a bad back and stuff. He isn't very threatening at all, but it is a fun and different take on the mask. Once again, this is a well done episode and is acted really well. The fact that they got most of the actors from the first episode to come back is a real treat as well. The story is fun and it scared me a little more than the first because the mask is actually trying to harm the characters instead of just getting them into a bad situation. Honestly, if the first episode was better, then this would have been a much better episode. The fact that the new mask isn't very threatening and causes the character to be old isn't as fun as the old mask that was featured here, and it does tell, especially when you compare the two. Also the fact that at the start the salesman destroyed all the other masks, which made me sad because I wanted to know how they acted when worn, but oh well.
So you really do like this show. Talk about another episode that's good.
So we'll talk about another episode so I can log you into a Felsom security so I can kill you. Yeah! Nothing. So I've talked about nearly everything about this show, like to death by now, but the one thing that I haven't actually touched upon is the show's relationship to the books. Well, it's no surprise that the episodes of Goosebumps were based on the Goosebumps books, and nearly every one of them is one of those stories. In the span of 74 episodes, there are only 4 original stories in the entire run, one of which is actually based on a few other stories, the Monster Blood ones, and 3 of them are wholly original. And honestly, they're pretty crummy because they don't have the same feel to them as all of the others, and the story just really falls flat. It's the trilogy episodes. This is the only 3-parter in the entire show run, and it really doesn't feel like it needed to be. It just feels like 3 separate stories that right at the end they all just sort of come together, and there's not even a really good conclusion. Even the twist is very, very shit, where it just turns out that Carl didn't die. Like, that's so boring. Honestly, this could have been turned into a different episode. Like, they had so many other books that they never used. But all the other episodes were adapted from the books, and so because of that, a lot of them have little changes to them. Some of them are, just little things like, person's name has been changed, or a certain character has a bit more role in the story. It just makes it for a better episode to watch, because when you're converting something from a book to a movie, they're 2 different mediums, so you have to change things always. There's always going to be things that don't perfectly align. Then you have some episodes which are just completely different in terms of plot and in terms of the twist, in terms of everything really. Like take A Day at Horrorland for example, the episode that I talked about last time, the cliffhanger episode, which pisses me off so much. So in the book, apparently the main character Luke, I think his name was, when they're going around the Horrorland theme park, there's actually a sign that says, "Do not pinch the horrors." And when they get to the game show, they actually do pinch one of the horrors, and then he explodes. Like, he blows up like a balloon and explodes. It's really, really weird. And then that's how they get away. They just pinch all the monsters, and they steal a bus and drive away. And the twist at the end is that there's a horror in the back of the bus or something. And honestly, that story is still okay, but I think the way that the show did it was a lot better. I honestly think that the game show element to the whole thing was really good. I really, really would have hated to see the pinching aspect, because I think that's pretty freaking hokey. Like, that's silly even for a children's show. But the thing is that the ending is so much more satisfying because it didn't end on a literal cliffhanger. And because of that, they actually do return in future books, which is, pretty cool. They go back to Horrorland more than once. So with all that, let's just move on to the next episode. So the next episode I'm going to talk about is still one of the better ones, and it's called Say Cheese and Die, starring none other than the heartthrob Hey Girl meme man himself, Ryan frickin' Gosling, when he was like 14 or something. Oh my god, he is so young. Yeah, he's probably the most famous person in the whole series to have worked on Goosebumps, in my opinion. Anyway, a couple of kids spy on this creepy guy named Spider before they invade his personal space and steal this strange camera that he has. This is a bad camera though, so whenever you take a picture, it doesn't come out right, and whatever it shows, it comes true, like his dad's new car being smashed or his friend going missing. It's all cursed! Not knowing what to do, he tears up the pictures and that actually fixes everything, so he decides to take it back and forget about it. It's a bit of a silly ending if you ask me. One thing that pissed me off though in this episode is actually something really, really silly. The girl, Shari, goes missing for 24 hours, and when she comes back at home, her parents are happy to see her, and then she goes out to help Gosling with getting rid of the camera. What kind of parents would let their daughter out after she went missing for a day? I would have locked her up in a room forever after that. It's just so ridiculous. So they trap Spider in a picture only for the twist to be that he gets out. Honestly, until the very end, this was one of the better episodes. The relationship between the kids and the acting is really good. I like the cinematography because they use weird and low angles and stuff like that. The use of the camera and the fact that you aren't quite sure. They lead you on this path of like, is it really cursed? Is it not cursed? Is it just a coincidence? Which is really, really cool because you don't honestly know what is going on until near the end when Shari actually does go missing and you're like, yeah, it's definitely cursed. Like if they had fixed up the ending a little bit more, I think I would have liked it. Just putting the camera back in the warehouse where they find it is pretty lame. And then when Spider gets trapped in the picture only to get let out the same day that he got trapped, you know, like if this was me and I had a, you know, cursed camera, I would probably keep it in a box somewhere and keep it safe so nobody could use it. Who knows what this Spider guy was like? He could have been taking pictures of all different people to try and curse them and kill them. I don't know. Why would you put it back in his custody? It's pretty silly, but at least it's one of the better episodes up until the end. So when I've been watching this show, I've noticed that quite a few people went on to do all different kinds of things after Goosebumps. Now, not everybody. There was a lot of people that just went on to do extras work or, you know, be background characters. So some people just did nothing afterwards. But there are a few people that did have some star power. Amanda Tapping is the first one. She stars as Samantha Carter in SG-1, and she is in It Came From Beneath the Sink playing the mum. She doesn't play one of the kids. We also saw Katerina Scorsone, who plays one of the main characters in Grey's Anatomy, which I don't watch, so I don't know her name of the show, but yeah, that's cool. Colin Mockery, who's famous for the show Whose Line Is It Anyway, does a very, very quick cameo. He has one line and then he just sort of walks off the screen in the episode Bad Hair Day. Adam West, who you might know as the Mayor of Quahog from Family Guy, but he was also the 60s Batman. He plays the Galloping Gazelle in Attack of the Mutant episode, and honestly, it's a superhero role and it looks like he's just having an absolute blast doing it. He's not taking it too seriously. Michael Callis, who plays Luke from The Day at Horrorland, he is actually the original voice of DW from the show Arthur, the cartoon. Like, I didn't realize that a boy did the voice of DW. I always thought it was a girl. Laura Vandervoort also starred in 3 different episodes of Goosebumps. She is famous for her role as Supergirl in the show Smallville. She also was one of the leads in the show V. I think she's in the new Supergirl TV show as well, but I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not sure. One of the episodes that she's in is called The Haunted House Game, and it's actually one of the more fun episodes. It's like a board game and stuff, but honestly, it's not the best. It has a very, very shit ending as well, which I totally saw coming, to be honest. I don't know why they even did it. If you're a fan of the Resident Evil movies, then you know the douchebag Wesker, who's like the big bad guy towards the end of all this franchise. He's played by Sean Roberts, who is also in another episode called The Perfect School, where he plays a douchebag. It's good to see that he's been typecast from such a young age. Now lastly, we have Hayden Christensen, which is probably the second most famous person to come out of this list, because you might know him as Anakin Skywalker from the prequel trilogy of the Star Wars series. He's in the episode Night of the Living Dummy 3, which is actually one of the more fun episodes as well. Hayden Christensen is visiting his relatives and they hate him and they make lots of fun of him and stuff like that. And the whole house is filled with dummies, including Slappy, of course, because, you know, he's the star dummy. Even though these dummies are terrorizing Hayden Christensen, the other kids claim that they're not doing it. And it turns out that it was actually Hayden doing it the whole time. He was pretending to scare himself to get back at them and get them in trouble. But that's the end of the first episode. In the second episode, it turns out that Slappy was all jealous, like saying, oh, well, you think you could be up to mischief? Well, I'm gonna be up to mischief. And he does the same thing and he terrorizes the kids. Hayden in this acts so full of life and everything. It's way different from what he did in Star Wars. He has so much emotion and range and all that kind of stuff, and he's actually having fun. Maybe this is before he got the role, and, you know, George Lucas said you're not allowed to have fun. Maybe it's before he got sand everywhere, because, you know, everyone knows Hayden hates sand. But then Slappy turns him into a dummy. Oh, maybe that's why his acting is so wooden after this. Ooh, shots fired. So lastly, they stop Slappy by, you know, hitting him with a thunderbolt, which causes him to explode, and everything goes back to normal and everybody's happy. The twist here, though, is that when the kids go to say goodbye to Hayden Christensen, he turns his head around like 360 to say goodbye, like turns his head all the way around to the left and he says goodbye, then he turns it all the way back around. It looks really, really silly and goofy, but honestly, it's still fun to watch.
See, so many good things came out of this show, including actors, didn't it?
It sure did, Chicky. Why don't you just come over here and I'll tell you about one of the episodes that will stay in my memory forever.
Yeah, that sounds
good. So let's talk about one final episode, and honestly, this was one that made me rage it so much, and it's called Say Cheese and Die Again. This is a sequel to the last episode that we talked about, and it was made 2 years later, and none of the same actors came back and wanted to reprise their roles, so no more Ryan Gosling here, sadly. The story for this is that Greg, played by Patrick Thomas this time, writes an essay on a moment in his life that changed him. He writes about the evil camera, of course. The teacher thinks that this is a great read, but gives him an F because he asked for a real story. He doesn't believe that what's written is actually real, and he asks for proof. So Greg gets back to the factory and steals the camera again, but where's Spider and stuff? What happened to him after the first episode? Who knows? The plot doesn't explain it very well, but he does get the camera and takes a photo of Shari, which comes out negative, and then she takes one of him, which comes out fat. The next day, Greg wakes up to be super fat and keeps getting fatter over the rest of the episode, while Shari keeps getting skinnier. Deathly skinny. Now this is why I have some issues with the story. 1. The teacher still doesn't believe what's going on. 2. The fact that this entire adventure happened to get a better grade. Like really, that is the motivation for these people? 3. The first episode is clearly established that if you tear up the photos, then you break their curse. So what do? They don't tear it up, of course. They fucking take it to a photo lab. Remember those? To have a negative turned into a positive and a positive turned into a fucking negative, and that works. What the fuck? How does that even make a lick of fucking sense? If anything, that should make Greg turn skinny and Shari turn fat because they just reversed the fucking picture. Then the twist is that the teacher still doesn't believe him, saying that, oh, he just wore a fat suit yesterday or something. So they take a photo of him and he loses all of his hair, and then the episode ends. Now, I don't know about you, but when I watch something, I like to have a clear narrative and a conclusion to the story. But this doesn't. Does Greg get an A in the class? Who the fuck knows? That was the whole reason for this episode and it doesn't even conclude, and that pisses me off to no end. I'm not done ranting about this episode either. The effects are fucking horrible. When Greg turns fat, at first they put a wide angle lens up close to his face and make it look fatter, but then it doesn't because it just looks like it's got a wide angle lens on his face, and then when he moves, it skews in the wrong direction and it just looks like shit. Then they use a real fat guy for the close-ups of his crack and from behind, and then they use a fat suit as well, which looks utterly terrible. Honestly, the entire episode is just one big turd. This is the worst episode of the entire series, hands down, in terms of plot, in terms of effects, in terms of scares, in terms of everything. Honestly, this episode pissed me off more than anything else in the show because I just yelled and yelled at the screen.
No, you tricked me. That was too much for me to take. I'm feeling weak.
Then this should finish you off. In my opinion, Goosebumps is not worth it. For the most part anyway. It does not fully hold up to today's standards. Like, the acting is over the top and pretty cheap, the effects are sometimes really, really bad, the stories are all over the place as well in terms of quality, but don't get me wrong, there are good episodes in this show. Like, I will honestly recommend the Haunted Mask episode to anybody, but I would not recommend watching the entire series. But I don't feel bad in watching it, not at all. This was a big nostalgia trip for me. I remembered some of the books and then I remembered some of the episodes when going through it, so I did get a nostalgic kick whilst watching it, and maybe you would too if you did as well. I honestly was always curious to see what the twist was going to be at the end of each story and to see if I could guess it, because it was like a little game that me and my girlfriend had. But my rating of not worth it is for me as an adult to other adults. But I will say that this show is worth it for children. This show is still pretty scary and it's still got lots of great imagery and stuff like that. The shadows are really good, and I think even as a child, you will watch this show and you will enjoy it. I know that going back and watching it as an adult, it's kind of phony and, you know, pretty crummy, but as a kid, this was still pretty scary, you know? Like, I can honestly see why I was scared of this as a kid, and I can think that future children will still get the same enjoyment that I got out of it. This will scare your kid in the right way, with its many creepy themes, the pretty good cinematography, and the fact that it always has a happy ending. For the most part, I think few episodes don't have the happiest of endings, but regardless, the fact that it has a happy ending will help offset anything that the kid went through in order to reach that point. Though there are some episodes which are good and some episodes that are bad, I think that this is pretty good, and it will help teach children to not really be afraid of the dark. It's not something that, you know, these monsters don't really exist. It's just something to scare you just enough so you realize that it's not real. And I think that's a good, valuable lesson to learn. Like, the dark isn't a scary place.
You may have beaten me by tearing the show apart, and now it's time for me to rest. Maybe I'll go to the horror land in the sky.
Chicky, you were psychotic, and I hope you never come back. I'm glad for this to be over.
Over? But aren't you forgetting one integral thing?
Like what?
The twist!
Huh?
Why do you think I've been praising Goosebumps and saying it's the best?
Because I read a spell and it brought you to life, but duh.
No. Haven't you ever wondered why your name is Lytane? Why this world is so strange?
What are you talking about? This is a perfectly normal world.
The L in R.L. Stein stands for Lytane. You are one of the books that you don't like. I tried to keep you happy and loving it, but now nothing can save you.
This can't be happening. I'm real. I'm not a book. No! I don't even need to move because I'm on a green screen. But then Slappy turns him into a puppet. Maybe that's why his future performances have been Pretty Woman. Damn it. Damn it, Pretty Woman. Maybe that's why his acting had became so wooden after this. Ah! Shots fired. So lame. For absolutely forever. Damn it. Not worth it. For the most part, anyway. Damn it, I can't remember my line. Hey Chicky, do you know what doesn't make sense?
What doesn't?
The fact that you're a chicken and you can fly.